Okay, warm welcome. Oh, that's why it's saying muted.
I'll come again.
Oh, it's unmuted now. Okay, cool. Well, there you go. I think a few weeks away, not doing webinars, and we're getting rusty as to how to run a webinar. Thanks, Sarah, for unmuting me. Anyway, warm welcome to everybody who joined us. We'll just give a few more minutes for, well, actually a minute, let's say, for those who registered to join us. Very keen to make sure that everyone who did register gets a fair chance to hear all of the insights from the report. So today's focus is on our global digital health key trends for the last 12 months, the year of 2022. It's been an interesting year from many reasons, and therefore some fascinating insights coming out from there. For those of you who are not necessarily following the stream of activity that we have both by email and or by LinkedIn, you'll know that this report was published at JP Morgan 2023, which for those in the know is the JP Morgan, the bank's healthcare conference, which has happened for the last 40-something years in San Francisco and always takes place in the second week of January. And true to form is also always a very rainy week. So you get very wet moving around from hotel to hotel where each different organization is hosting an event or another. Cool. Okay, so my name is Julien de Salaberry. For those who don't know me, I'm the CEO and the founder of Galen Growth. Galen Growth is the world's leader in digital health data, intel, and insights, and the preferred partner for digital health for many verticals, namely pharma, digital health, medical device, insurance, consulting firms, banks, CVCs, VCs, etc. So many blue chip clients among our clients, and all of them rely on us to help navigate and make the right decision in relation to digital health. We do that because everything we do is powered by our in-house database called HealthTech Alpha, which all our clients subscribe to. And that platform offers us, as well as our clients, more data than anyone else. Best-in-class taxonomy, which means you find things you're looking for rather than having to Google yourself for hours until you find it. And of course, has the best data library for each venture we have cataloged, so that you can do your early stage due diligence entirely from your desktop. Not to mention that all of that is, of course, powered by our unmatched expert team, of which Sarah is one. So introducing Sarah. Dr. Schmachtenberg is our head of research for Europe and North America, sitting in Basel with me in Switzerland, which is far colder than San Francisco. So it's good to be back. And she leverages the platform for all the thematic reports we publish on a month-by-month basis. And so this particular report is no different. So our focus today is on global trends in digital health in 2022. So that's a 12-month period running from 1st of January 22 to the 31st of December. We include all of those days because it's amazing how many deals suddenly running in the last few days of the year, particularly in regions that don't necessarily celebrate Christmas. It is a 55-page report of data and insights. We won't be going through 55 slides today. Please download the report from our research page, which is completely free to download. But what we will do is focus on the salient points, and more importantly, Sarah will spend some time supporting or certainly giving you evidence as to how we reach a conclusion of some of those key trends. As you know, Scope Analysis is all digital health ventures from their date of incorporation after the date of 2002 for the purpose of the report, and private ventures, so it's those that have not listed, and of course we're focused on Asia Pacific, the Middle East, Western Europe, North America, and South America in this report. So Sarah, welcome.
Thank you very much, Julien, for the warm welcome.
And a warm welcome to everybody else who's joined us since I started talking. Let's not necessarily start with funding, just to be different for once. Let's start with partnerships. So, you know, we'll see from the funding discussion that 2022 has been an interesting year because, of course, during the course of the Q4 21, suddenly interest rates started going up, and then, of course, a war started in the Balkans, and so suddenly, you know, things changed. So let's look at partnerships, largely because for me, that is really where the scaling is taking place. And by partnerships, I really want to feature the number of corporations in the core verticals that we know engage digital health and their thirst to build partnerships with digital health ventures across the globe. So have we seen a similar deceleration in partnerships that we have in funding, or has it been a different scene completely?
Thanks, Julien. It's a good question because, like you said, everyone, the headlines you see, funding's down, the world's going to collapse. However, unlike funding, digital health partnerships actually increased from 2021. So that's exciting news. You had a 50% increase over 2021 in partnerships between digital health ventures and corporates. By corporates, we've broken down for you in the donut chart that you see, with 21% of those partnerships being with healthcare providers and healthcare systems, right? Hospitals. Followed by 13% by pharma, biotech, genomics companies, right? So this is great news. Digital health is still expanding. We're seeing a lot of resilience despite the funding downturn, right? It's not all doom and gloom. And what you do see if you look at the global distribution of partnerships, right? You see a very similar breakdown to what we would usually see in 2021. If you compare 2021, there is a bit of a reduction there in the actually the digital partnerships in Asia Pacific. Those have mostly gone then to Europe, where Europe has gone up a bit, Asia Pacific has gone down, but we're only talking about 4% points. So so mostly distribution stays the same, partnerships keep going up, which is great news.
Yeah, I'm particularly impressed by the fact that North America continued to charge along really, and has you know, the lion's share of partnerships if you look at it respective to the rest of the world, and that's very apparent. You know, JP Morgan, you could feel the vibe, the fact that you know, corporations are really looking to continue drilling into what digital health is doing and looking at how they can really improve their value chain.
There's no deceleration there.
None whatsoever. So that's very encouraging, and of course we'll watch 2023 with interest. And for further details, of course, to really drill into who's doing what with whom, we encourage you to get access to the platform, which is free to access, and start navigating around. So actually get a sense of, you know, by category or by therapeutic area, etc., who's doing what, and by way of partnerships between a corporation and a venture. Okay, so listen, that's partnerships, and that's already a serious bit of good news coming out of 22, and hopefully setting the tone for 23. Let's look at funding then, because that's really the flip side of the coin. So in Q3 at HLTH, the big digital health conference in Las Vegas, which we attended and where we published a report, we looked at Q3 2022, and there we were talking about a deceleration of about 35% year on year of funding. Yeah, so we're excluding any IPO, any SPAC, any M&A from that's pure funding. So what did it look like at the end of the year then, 3 months further on?
That's not good.
Less good anyway.
Yeah, less good. Because we still had that really funding high in Q4 2021. 2022, we'll see actually flattened off. But you ended the year at minus 41% year on year, decline in funding, minus 24% on number of deals. In particular, like I just said, Q4, you did see a bit of a stabilization in the in that funding. However, when you compared Q4 2021, then it really didn't look so good. On a positive note, really, the deal value, right? The amount of the average dollar per deal has stayed relatively constant after pandemic and then through the pandemic to where we are now. So that's a positive note that the deal value is staying the same. However, that number of deals has gone down, and therefore the total number of the total deal value for venture capital has indeed decreased 41%. You can dig in a little deeper. What is encouraging for us here at Galen Growth is that you see on the left, 2022 still exceeded the 2020 values, really. So 2020, you have that pandemic shock. We had first half of the year, second half of the year, the acceleration really going into 2021. So the fact that 2022, you're coming above 2020 means that, yes, you had that exceptional year in 2021, but in the end, you're coming back to the 2020 values and stabilizing, right? Coming back to reality, more or less. The bulk of that decrease, that deceleration, is really coming from what you see on the right, the Series B, Series C, Series D funding rounds, right? Those really big ticket funding deals didn't happen in 2022, or happened much less. There were definitely still some mega deals, the deals over 100 million, but the numbers of them were very much less than 2021. Early stage Series A remained about stable with 2021, way above the 2020 values. So there we see there's still a healthy pipeline. It's as you're getting to the later stages, you might run into some problems if you're trying to raise funding, right?
Yep.
For those of you, we will be coming out with regional reports at the end of this month. So stay tuned if you're interested in understanding the same type of evaluation of the regions. But to give you a little sneak peek at that, right? The North America came way down in the funding. Asia Pacific also, and I mean, there's certainly a decline across the regions, except for, in fact, the Middle East ended 2022 above 2021. So that's a little sneak peek of regions.
Cool. Apologize in advance. It appears that someone's got a drill going on the floor above us, so we can hear the drill in the background. Hopefully you can't hear it. So that's cool. So listen, funding is down, but the good news is the following items, I think. The following is that average deal size started decelerating and has stabilized. Fantastic news. We closed ahead of 2019 and not too far away from 2020. In fact, slightly ahead of 2020 if you look at a global level, which is exciting news. In other words, 21, fantastic year, but an anomaly. So really we're back to normal. So it's positive news from that perspective. And we're seeing a move towards early stage. So the big tickets are decelerating, but the early stage is seeing favor. So that's exciting news from that perspective. Now, talking of the year, the regional report. So at the end of this month, we'll be publishing deep dives in each of the regions. So this is a global aggregate, but we're actually getting into the detail. But another sneak preview for you is, and it's really around really blowing our trumpet here. But if we look at the US, now, Rock Health came out with a number during JP Morgan of $15 billion of venture funding going into US ventures. Now, we know that Rock Health underrepresents the ecosystem largely because they don't track every single deal. They track deals of a certain size. So if we were to look at all the deals in the US, or North America more specifically, but the US is 99% of North America, where did the US close? Because I don't think it's as depressing as we think it is it?
We track, like you said, all the deals from a corporation up, seed included, and we calculated 20.7 billion. Yeah. So easily 5 billion above those Rock Health numbers. So there's definitely a lot of the ecosystem there that's being missed, and then add 5 billion to your 15 and you have a significantly high number. Yeah,
and the good news of that is that actually the US only is very shy of 2020 in terms of its close, if you look at it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So again, we're back to normality here. It's not depressive. We haven't reversed the trend. Anyway, enough on funding, and it's exciting from that perspective. And as I said, at the end of the month, we'll be drilling into it by region. Quick advertising. There's a question coming up here, but I'm just going to reiterate. Please use the Q&A function to ask some questions because we're very keen to answer the questions. The question here around. We're doing separate analysis on diseases areas apart from geographies, i.e. oncology. Is this something we're going to address today, or is this something we should really wait until the end of the month when we drill in by region? Because a therapeutic area, of course, is a fascinating topic and one we can drill into, and we like to drill into subcategories such as breast cancer versus obviously skin cancer. So it'd be good to get us that sense, but is it best for them to wait until the end of the month? I
can skip over that and hit it if we want to.
Okay, cool. Well, before we do, we'll come back to oncology. Let's not lose the sight. Fantastic. We'll go back to oncology. Fantastic. I just wanted to check. Second question here is: looks like the EU had a big jump looking from 2020 to 2022. Now, the EU is a difficult one to measure here because, of course, we're looking at key markets in this particular slide, not all EU countries. But do you want to make any quick observations about EU key markets and whether they how they responded?
We're talking about Western Europe, right?
Yeah,
so
correct. Which really is where most of the digital innovation sits.
Absolutely, and then you can't exclude UK, you can't exclude Switzerland or the Nordics.
Correct.
Out of that, you're absolutely right. Jumping from 2.3 billion to 4.9, you do have a huge jump in Europe. So it's really exciting to see that European market coming alive. And I think, Julien, you saw it at JP Morgan, a lot of those investors are actually shifting some attention to Europe, realizing that there's a lot of venture activity going on here, a lot of ventures with very strong clinical evidence. So it's exciting to see that European market coming.
I mean, the key point for me from looking at, I think EU is probably, and Jeff, you might want to clarify, but I think you mean Europe rather than European Union, I think. But anyway, I think, when we look at the overall trend year on year, so 21 was very strong. But if we look at the overall trend, North America, Asia Pacific and South America are down by about 40% roughly. Now, largely because why? The US is down and it's 99% of the deals. In Asia, China's locked down and it's about 80% of the deal value. And of course, in South America, Brazil's having a wobble and it's really a large share of deal value in South America. But in Europe, we saw a deceleration year on year about 20%. I'm using approx numbers here because they're actually in detail. Yeah, it means Europe, so that's cool. So in Europe, deceleration of about 20%. The exact numbers in the report. Right. Why do we think that is? Why is it not hammered as hard as it was in the US?
The European market is, we oftentimes complain about it here, perhaps it was an advantage. A lot of European funding is coming from government sources. I mean, I say a lot. I think last time we looked at it, about 70% of European funding is coming from government sources. So there you just didn't see that slowdown that you had from the venture capital, right? When you're looking at grants, those remained. And so that's where the European market really is able to maintain momentum because they have all the government funding backing them, with all the disadvantages that coming with it, that's small grants and not the big VC. But in this case, it wasn't.
Let's see whether 2023 sees a continued resilience there. So I think, Jeff, it's not necessarily a big jump, it's more or less deceleration, I guess, than other regions. Let's look at M&A activity though, because of course we talked about funding, that's fine, but of course exits are an important component to this, and we look at that very closely. So if we look at exits or M&A exit rather than IPO and SPAC in digital health, what's some of the key takeaways, or what's the biggest takeaway from that?
Well, what we see is that there was a significant decrease in M&A activity. I think that was something like 25% down on the M&A activity, so down from 199 to 168, right, across the board. The SPACs collapsed, right? The IPOs also were almost non-existent in 2022. But there was still some significant M&A activity. And again, comparing it to 2020, you do have a significant jump. It's just not the jump that you saw in 2021. What's very interesting, Julien, maybe I'm taking your next point. I apologize in advance. What's very interesting though is when you dig into the M&A activity and understand what's really going on here. And that you'll see in the report is that what what's what we skipped over and maybe we'll come back to is that only 25% of ventures globally have raised funding in the last 18 months. Sorry, that's 25% have raised funding.
Yeah.
And therefore there are a lot of ventures that are running low on cash, right? And what you see is at the same time, there's a very much a maturing of digital health across the globe, and there are mature ventures who are looking to scale, right? And so the light blue bars at the bottom are the venture to venture acquisition, right? M&A activity, venture to venture is really growing steadily year on year because those mature ventures now really have the opportunity to gobble up some of the smaller ventures who aren't able to raise funding, or and that helps them build out their offering. Now, building out their offering means, of course, building digital health platforms, right? Is going to become more of a topic in 2023. We think really those platforms that gives the HCP really an offering, a solid offering, and not just piecemeal offering that they have to go to different ventures. They can offer a whole platform. So that's what's very exciting about the M&A is really that venture to venture M&A rather than the pharma companies or healthcare systems picking up the ventures.
Yeah, I mean, certainly for me, it's been fascinating to watch that trend of growing venture to venture M&A activity. Yeah. And I guess we'll continue seeing more of that because the correlation being, of course, this lack of funding pickup. 75% of ventures across the globe are not not achieved, I guess, new funding rounds. Now that number is probably plus or minus something, simply because not every funding round is disclosed. But yes, that is a significant indicator that 23 is going to be a challenging year for a lot of ventures. And therefore, I think alluding to what might happen in 23, and we'll come back to that, but essentially we're already seeing retrenching, restructuring, focusing on profitability, and therefore whole growth plans being rethought by some of the larger players. And of course, this sort of acquisition activity. So I think we'll see that trend continue to hold out going forwards, in my view. In our view, going forwards. Back to this funding question. I know you did some interesting analysis looking at who are, they call them the regular offenders. In other words, who are the guys who have consistently been investing in digital health, irrespective of what weather it is out there. So what does that look like as a theme?
It's a very interesting kind of a side analysis we did for this particular report, is looking at the investors. Because we know, to answer your question, Julien, directly, 870 investors. If we look at 3 time periods, the first is pre-pandemic, so 2018, 2019. We look at 2020, 2021, so we'll say height of the pandemic, and then 2022 last year. That box is a bit smaller, it only has 1 year in it, but hang with me here. So if we look at the investors in each of these time periods, overlap them, there are 870 investors that invested in each of those time periods. So we're going to call those the core, and probably in this year we might dig a little bit deeper into understanding who those core investors are and what they're doing. But really you see on the left bar chart, the explosion of unique investors in 2021. Everyone wanted to get into digital health. It was, making a significant gain. So 2022, that hasn't gone back as much as perhaps I would have expected. So it's still quite high. There's still a lot of interest in digital health, and that there's no reason why that shouldn't continue through 2023. Yeah,
I know that we're planning to do a slightly deeper dive into who these investors are and what their focus is during the course of 23, because I think for a lot of these digital ventures that have not raised, it's going to be interesting for them to certainly go and visit the core investors, we call them, rather than some of the tourists that have been wandering around digital health in the last few years. That's a great question from Howard here, Howard in Canada, who's asking for any insights on motivation or lack of motivation, for that matter, in terms of the drop of valuations. I think it's fair to say that valuation drop has been more significant in the later stage deals. That, of course, it's a bit early to say whether we bottomed down valuations, but certainly valuations are a challenge for investors. The bigger deals, I've certainly seen the valuation drops up to 50%. So back to the 2019 valuation levels, particularly for the bigger deals. And then what we have seen as a trend, Howard, is a move towards debt financing in order to allow investors to avoid the valuation question, but to keep the wheels on the machine as these ventures return back for funding. And so that's the trend we've seen over the last few months, certainly, as the valuation uncertainty persists. So thanks for the question, Howard. Is this a good time to talk about oncology, Sarah?
We certainly can talk about oncology. Happy to do that. I'm gonna have to skip through a bit because
Sure. But Christina asked the question, whether we will be looking at oncology. So, I mean, the short answer is yes, Christina. Yeah. The platform will allow you to actually drill yourself into oncology, and we will be looking at oncology again by region as we deep dive. But that's, of course, for the reports we're publishing at the end of this month. But what does it look like at a high level, global level?
At a high level, global level, oncology did come out on top this year, just like last year, right? They held on to that #1 rank this year, but at a significant margin, right? Cardiovascular took second place at 3.6 billion, right? Oncology at 4.9. So indeed, you still see that that big focus on oncology ventures. A lot of that has to do with. Now I'm going to skip back up. To our digital health clusters, right?
Yep.
Because medical diagnostics and research solutions also came up on top for the digital health clusters. These are the type of solutions, right? And therefore, oncology has a lot to do with that, especially those research solutions, the omics solutions, right? The bioinformatics, right? The matching. So there's where you see a match between the clusters that are coming up on top and oncology. So yes, oncology stayed on top. We encourage you to look into the report at Galen Gross taxonomy, right? That's kind of what's behind the digital health clusters. I don't have it in front of me today, but we do break up digital health into clusters and categories below those. So you see the first medical diagnostics coming out on top as far as key digital health cluster, and diagnostics really had a good year this year, or had a strong year, I should say, with the most amount of regulatory approvals, right? They had the highest number of ventures with clinical evidence, and now also coming up on top as far as funding. We do expect to see that continuing, but I'm going to stop there because I know Julien is probably going to ask about
no, it's all right.
What's coming up in 2023.
No, I just wanted to reiterate the fact that, of course, these are aggregates. So when we look at oncology in Health Tech Alpha, you can look at it by breast cancer, by lung cancer, etc. So we break it right down to those sub-oncology or sub-cancer levels. But certainly interesting to see how oncology has gone back up to top after really COVID, seeing mental health taking pole position in a lot of regions up until now. So there's that flip back to oncology. And of course, that will become more evident as we look at the regional deep dives at the end of the month. Now, digital health clusters here. Of course, every cluster has its own category as well. So, of course, good for people to look at the taxonomy as it's laid out within the report to get a better understanding of what we include, for example, in medical diagnostics by way of digital health categories. Cool. I'm very interested in one key theme that popped out at JP Morgan, and that is that investors, health systems, corporations in the US certainly are looking at proof points. So for them, proof points is it the right business model and how does it work? Of course, that's very unique to every business. What are the reimbursement pathways? And of course, that's still work in progress. Some countries have got their framework in place, like Germany. The US has got certain reimbursement codes as well. But above all, it was all about clinical evidence. Can that digital health venture really prove medically that it can do what it's claiming to do? So we did that analysis earlier on this year, and of course we continue to look at that very closely. So if we look at 22 and we look at clinical evidence, can you help us understand how we are measuring clinical evidence and what does it look like at the moment?
Gladly. When I went to Frontiers Health, in fact, in October, right, clinical evidence was already really a big topic there as well. And with the funding being a little bit more scarce, it's no one questions why. Finally, we want to see, okay, it's nice. There was a lot of hype around digital health. Now we want to see, does it really work? You know, these ventures are old enough. They should be able to produce evidence. Now, by evidence, what we're talking about is peer-reviewed publications, regulatory filings, proof regulatory filings, and clinical trials, right? And those are the three core pieces of evidence that we see and that we look at for a venture in order to calculate their evidence signal, right? If the evidence signal is greater than 40, that means either they have a clinical trial, or they have a regulatory approval, or they have multiple peer-reviewed publications. Right, so looking at ventures with that evidence signal above 40, right, which we say is really our critical threshold, we look at it by digital health cluster, right? Seeing that shouldn't be surprising to those of you who know digital health quite well. Medical diagnostic solutions, they need evidence, they need clinical evidence in order to get onto the market. So 27% of those ventures globally have clinical evidence, right? So 27% is a low number, but it's showing, you know, there are a lot of seed stage ventures that still haven't been able to build that evidence yet. You know, there's still a large part of the markets that's building the evidence. So medical diagnostics is followed by patient solutions and then remote devices. Right, across the globe, really, there's not a huge difference in the different regions as far as clinical evidence and what percentage of ventures have that evidence signal greater than 40, with Middle East taking the top spot, Europe, North America coming after that, and then Asia Pacific, right? So it is, clinical evidence is a big hot topic for 2023. We expect to be on our Health Tech Alpha platform. You can see for each venture what kind of approvals they have, what kind of clinical trials and peer-reviewed publications.
Absolutely, and it's increasing a question for all of our big pharma clients, for example, who want to understand the quality of the medical evidence of a venture versus another, and are able to filter for clinical evidence on the platform. So they're using it as a screening criteria as they seek to identify the right digital venture to address a particular pain point that they are trying to solve. Christina's back again with the question, so it would be interesting to see the breakdown of these categories for therapeutic areas. The answer, Christina, is all of that is possible on the platform. You can actually interrogate the platform and look at exactly what the breakdown is by cluster or even by category in any therapeutic area you'd like to choose. I don't think we have the chart here to address that question. But I can assure you'll be able to get that information on the platform yourself, Christina. If you can't, then shout. Keep the questions coming, guys, because we're rapidly running out of time. We'd love to answer all of your questions today if we can. But in the meantime, I guess one last question for you, Sarah, with crystal ball in mind a little bit. We've talked about 22. We talked about the fact actually it isn't as doom and gloom as we think it is. There are certainly patches of or silver linings to all those clouds, and hopefully we've been able to sort of start showing that a little bit. So if we look at 23, what do we think that's going to look like in the next few months? I know we're going to watch it carefully, and we'll be updating our subscribers regularly. But what's your best take on what we've learned and how we think that's going to shape 23?
It's a good question. We don't have a crystal ball, but I think we've touched on a lot of the topics that we really see for 2023. Of course, clinical evidence that we just talked about will become critical, and that's going to drive partnerships, because a lot of times the ventures need to partner with big pharma or partner with corporate in order to have the capability to do clinical trials or to generate evidence, right? We expect to see that more acquisitions, the M&A activity to continue, especially as the funding is not going to pop back up to the 2021 levels, right? We're going to see a lot of that M&A because of the lack of funding But funding, we can't, who knows what's going to do in 2023, we can't predict anything. But the stabilization that we saw for Q4 of 2022 is very promising, that we're not going to keep nosediving. But I don't have a crystal ball. I can't promise anything.
No, we don't either. You're right. And I was interesting, a really interesting stat in the Financial Times yesterday. Pharmaceutical companies are reputed to have $1.4 trillion in cash sitting on their books looking to be deployed. So of course the biotech industry is rubbing its hands, and the PE firms even more so. But that could be an interesting set of activities as we look at digital health, because of course we expect more of pharmaceuticals to get involved in digital health. At this stage, some of the top 10 pharmacos are accountable for 50% of the digital partnerships across the globe. So we certainly need to see, will see, and need to see far more activity from pharmaceutical companies in digital health. I
think that's the message I got as well from the conferences, from what I've heard from the European investors, is that they still have cash.
Oh yeah, they're just waiting to see the valuations bottom out. I think back to Howard's question. Okay, listen, I think we've addressed all the questions today. So thank you very much for everyone's questions. This is only a snapshot of the full report, so we would certainly encourage you, if you haven't already downloaded it, to download for free. And those of you who do download for free, of course, that means you will become a Galen Growth subscriber, and you will be automatically notified as to when we publish the regional deep dives. That's due at the end of this month, and therefore some interesting read for you in early February. And of course, there will be some webinars to go with those as well, so that we can deep dive into the data behind it. All of our reports are powered by Altec Alpha, our proprietary platform, and all of you can get access for free. So please feel free to, when you're downloading the reports, you will ultimately get your account, and then you can go from there. You'll also find, of course, in the research page of the platform, all of our past reports, which include looking at digital platforms, looking at actually oncology, looking at women's health, looking at mental health, looking at so all of the hot topics. And so we certainly heartily recommend that you go and help yourselves, I guess, is the best answer. That's it. No further questions. I think we're on time, more or less. So thank you very much, everyone who joined us today. This has been recorded, so it will be made available soon, so that if you want to share that with anyone else, you'll be able to share the recording or rewatch it yourselves. But in the meantime, wishing you all a fantastic 2023, and looking forward to reconnecting with you in February for our next set of webinars and reports.
Thank you all.